Hey everyone, hope you learned a lot from the last Holocaust video. This one is going to look at kind of the ramifications of the Holocaust and how people were held accountable, how the Nazis were held accountable, and then a little bit of kind of some social psych experiments, two very famous ones that happened after to help explain why the Holocaust was able to happen. So, without further ado, first things first is following World War II and the Holocaust, there was something called the Nuremberg War Crimes Trials. And Axis leaders were tried for what are called crimes against humanity. And this includes things like deportation, enslavement, murder, extermination, and other atrocities. There wasn't a full-on term, genocide, that we have today. That's going to come a tiny bit later. And at the Nuremberg trials, many top Nazis received death sentences or long imprisonments. Several Einsatzgruppen and camp leaders were also executed. The trial showed that political and military leaders could be held accountable for actions in wartime. That last sentence is huge. We've talked about a lot of atrocities. A lot. I mean, World War I had the Armenian genocide. I mean, you can go back to even the Mongols. And in all of those cases, no one was really held accountable. No, there's never been a country before this to put another country's people on trial for something that they did. This was a brand new concept that was started at the Nuremberg trial. This idea that we can, after a war, hold people accountable for their actions if we think that they were considered crimes against humanity. So several Nazis are either given long prison sentences or sentenced to death for their actions in being a part of the Holocaust. Now, Hitler will not be held accountable because he commits suicide. All right, so there's two experiments I want to talk to you about. And the first one's called the Milgram experiment, and it happened in the 60s. And this experiment was to show how far people would go because they're told to. So, here's how this works. Letter E and letter L are both actors. This experiment is to see what letter T will do. And what happens is letter L is fake hooked up to a thing that will give him electric shocks. Letter T is to give the shocks if letter L gets a question wrong. E, he is the person in charge. He's going to be telling letter T what to do. So he's the teacher and he's the learner. Now, he's sending volts of electricity to letter L, or at least he thinks he is. So it'll go like this. Letter E will tell T to ask a question. So he'll say something like, what's 2 plus 2? And letter L, on purpose, because it's all scripted, is going to say 5. 2 plus 2 is 5. And T's going to say, oh, that's wrong, and send him electricity to shock him. And every time he gets a question wrong, you see the panel, it's going to be a higher and higher amount. And letter L is going to be screaming in pain. Granted, it's all fake. But he's going to scream, he's going to be like, stop, please stop. I have a heart problem. This is killing me. This hurts. And each time he's going to give a higher and higher shock to L while L is screaming out in pain. Anytime letter T, this guy, says, I'm not so sure about this, I don't think I should keep going, letter E is going to say something along the lines of, the study needs you to continue. You must proceed. You have to keep going. And just by letter E being there and telling him to continue, 65% of people in T's position, 65% will give a deadly shock to L. 65%, Milgram found in his study. He found that every single person in his study would give at least 300 volts before saying, nope, I'm not doing this. And 65% would give all 10 shocks, and the last one would be enough to kill him. Again, this is just a fake experiment. He doesn't actually die, but T thinks he does and is willing to give such a harsh shock. How does this relate to the Holocaust? Well, the idea is that this could be some Nazi, some person who goes along with the Holocaust because the Nazi Party tells them to. This could be someone, an ordinary everyday person in T, who because they are told to kill, does. 65% of the time, T gives a fatal shock to L. So that's the Milgram experiment. A few years later, I'll link this video. It's pretty good. Shows the experiment. A few years later, in 1971, there's another interesting experiment that takes place, and this is called the Stanford Prison Experiment. What happens in this one is this guy named Philip Zimbardo. He is going to take a group of college students. They're on summer break. They want to make some extra cash. And he says, if you join my study, I'll pay you, but just come do it. And by a flip of a coin, half of these college students become prison guards, and half of them become prisoners in the makeshift prison at Stanford University. And what happens within 2 days is the guards begin to dehumanize the fake prisoners. And the fake prisoners begin more and more to try to revolt, and the guards become more and more punitive in what they do. It gets so bad that the experiment has to end early, and that within 35 hours, some of the prisoners are screaming out, wanting it to end and in pain, and going, as Philip Zimbardo in his own words will say, kind of going crazy. So this experiment kind of illustrates what people will do when they're given power. And that if they're not trained correctly, and if they're not held accountable for their actions, that they could, with the power, kind of go to their head and kind of do some kind of atrocity-like things with it. So that is the Stanford Prison Experiment. Your assignment is to write me just one paragraph explaining kind of the end of the Holocaust and what you think of these two experiments. And you can find more information on what to write in that paragraph on PowerSchool. Thank you.